welcome to another episode of the Every Story Counts podcast. Very lucky today. Got Harry Matthews on, boxer, actor, he's doing it all. So thank you very much for coming on, Harry. Really appreciate it, mate. I know you're a busy man.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. Good to come on and chat and see what we can do.
Absolutely, mate. So tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up. What was it like?
I come from Pocklington, grew up with a mum and a dad and a brother who was a couple of years younger than me. Started off in Market Wheaton actually, and then I moved to Pocklington. I went to the junior school there, and then went to Woolgate School. I had a relatively normal childhood until I was about sort of 13, and then kind of I found out my dad wasn't my dad. He kind of left, was in and out of my life, said he'd be there, and then kind of we had a bit of a disagreement one day, and he just disowned me, kind of thing. To be honest, I was about 13.
So at 13, how did you deal with that?
He made his choice. I just wanted him to be there as a dad, and he thought it was all right to just show up and then disappear, and then show up and then disappear. And then when I questioned him about it, and I was sort of confused and was angry, he chose to kind of disown me. My mum ran a couple of gyms at the time, and she was training a gymnast called Natalie Asquith, and her dad was like an ex-professional boxer and trainer, and he kind of took me under his wing sort of then, and started learning to box. He started taking me around Leeds, sparring a lot of top amateurs and pros and things like that, and I kind of sort of found my identity through boxing, and sort of until I was about, when I become about a 15-year-old, up until about 20, I was boxing amateur. Did a box for York, All Saints for the first 3 fights. And then I moved to Leeds, boxed for Sharkies Round 1, amateur boxing club. That's where a lot of fighters came from, like Jack Bateson, Nicola Adams, people like that. Mark Bateson was sort of starting off then as well, who's like a well-known Leeds promoter. I ended up sort of moving from there. I went to a boxing academy in Durham and Hothall Community College. I ended up not getting much sparring, not getting many fights, and I just chose to leave. So then I joined St Paul's, a really famous club in Hull, where I would be around people like Luke Campbell, Tommy Coyle, Samir Menemni, people like that. I was around good stock all the time, and then I sort of, I ended up having about 42 amateur fights, won 34, won the multi-nations gold medal. I was always in winning the Yorkshire and Humberside championships. Got myself to the quarters of the under-20s ABAs, and just decided one day that I wanted to turn pro, which was as a 20-year-old. Went on to become sort of 9-0 in my first 9 pro fights. And then, do you know what? Things just took a bit of a turn. A few little problems outside, mixing with the wrong people, doing a few, bits of naughty stuff. And, obviously as a professional boxer, you have to sell enough tickets to be able to cover your opponent's purse, your house costs, and then they'd probably go like 50-50. You know what I mean? So if you want to earn $1,000, you've got to be selling at least $5,000 worth of tickets. And then you've got to give your trainer, manager, promoter 25% of that. So you're not really earning that much. So, you look to other means, and, I kind of was mixing with a few naughty people and doing a bit of dropping off here and there, and it caught up with me in the end. I took a year off boxing as well. But just before I took the year off, I boxed for the British Masters title, and I won that. And then I decided to become what's called a journeyman, an away fighter. Some people think they're fighters that just turn up and just, cover up and get paid. But in my eyes, I was always there to be a contender and to push these top guys the distance, or, if not, try and beat them, kind of thing. And I remember getting a call to box Chris Eubank Jr. in his 4th fight. And I remember thinking to myself, win, lose or draw, I just want to be there at the end. And I just want my credibility, and I just want that to be my one good performance in my career. And to be fair, that's the one that people kind of remember me for. It's just kind of gone from there, really. Still fighting today.
when you fought Chris Eubank Jr., did you see back then of how good he actually was?
Yeah, there were glimpses of what he could be. He was quite a clever boxer. He was quite slow paced in the first sort of 3 rounds. So I decided to try and rush him and take the fight to him. And I just remember thinking, I just want to draw blood. I just want to make a good statement in the first few rounds. And I did. I popped his nose, and he knew I was there. I meant business. And then I maybe sort of gassed in the last half of the fight a little bit. He kind of beat me on points, but it was quite a good performance. I was well in the fight. And in between that, mate, I was just training, working on a building site, and kind of was like bit down on my luck, thinking, okay, this is my shot to sort of give it a go. I went in there to try and beat him, but I also remember thinking, as long as I'm stood there at the final bell, because he was telling people he was going to stop me in 3 rounds, and I was just like, that's not going to happen, And I was trained by Nick Manners at the time, from Leeds. He's a very charismatic trainer. He trained Josh Warrington when he was on his way to the world title, and I think he was there up until sort of a few of his recent fights. Nick Manners, great guy. He's got a book out actually I think it's called "Got to Get Through This." But he was a Central Area champion himself. He wasn't just good for me training wise physically, he was really good for me mentally as well. And at the time, I had a bit of demons going on in my head, and he was always there to make me laugh, and he always brought the best out in me. We parted ways on amicably. But yeah, what I should say as well is the person that's been there for me from day one is Glenn Banks. He's been my manager, my trainer. He was the man that was there from the beginning. And another guy who's been in and out of my career, but still a really, really close friend, and I class him as a family member, is Niall Armand, who is still, training sort of British and Commonwealth champions today, and he's got a really good amateur stable in Fawn near Doncaster. And as well, the guy who got me into boxing, Sean Asquith, I like to mention him because he was the guy that first taught me what I know now. So yeah, you know what I mean. I've met a lot of good people in boxing, and it's given me a lot of good memories.
How tough was it going from this prospect as you was to possibly going all the way right to the very top, to then having to know that you were going to have to step down to be a journeyman?
Do you know what? I kind of just accepted it because I'd already found something else that I wanted to do. When I had that little, problem getting in trouble with the law, I decided that I was going to, maybe push towards being an actor. I thought I'd write a little story about it. It was a short film called Boxer, and it was a dramatised story. I never went to prison, but I nearly did. But that was my little wake-up call, and I just thought, I'm going to write a story about this. I'm going to use a few of my experiences and a few characters that I've met on the outside, and I got it made just before COVID lockdown #1, and it won like 5 awards. It picked up one last year actually for best cinematography. And since then, I've just tried to just sort of push on with the acting. So that's given me a new kind of goal. So with the boxing, it allows me to just, earn a little bit of money and, kind of still enjoy it, learn from it, pass my experience on to people that I'll be training. And just kind of use those experiences for, for my films and stuff like that.
How tough is it, journeyman wise, as in how much do you get notified before you're actually meant to be fighting?
Well, it's very tough because when you're fighting in someone else's backyard, the odds are always stacked against you. It's very hard to win on points, and you're always boxing against guys who are either on their way to boxing for British and Commonwealth titles or English titles and things like that. I mean, the amount of champions I've boxed is mental. I've boxed Liam Cameron 3 times. I boxed, obviously Chris Eubank Jr. and Jack Cullen, was his name, kid from Sheffield. It'll come to me.
How long before did they tell you you're going to fight then?
People that are 13-0 with 10 knockouts on the undercards to Anthony Joshua. I don't really get fazed by records anymore. I just think to myself, well, I've had this experience. I know I can go in there and give most people a good run for the money. And the thing I think that's kept me in the game and kept me looking like I do after 126 pro fights is I always stay in condition. I live the life. For as long as I still love boxing, I box that many names, I forget them sometimes. But yeah, it's been a good old ride. I mean, I think this is probably going to be my last year, and I want to focus more solely on the acting. But the acting is that up and down. It's like I've just shot a feature film called Bodley Harm. I played the lead called, And, it was a really great experience with, Luke Mayers, who gave me the opportunity from On Top Film. And, that got wrapped about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And since then, it's just been quiet with the acting, really. So I've just focused on PT and boxing now at the minute.
Well, we'll definitely come on to all your acting because, like I say, I've seen bits of it, and you do look very good at it. You look one of them type of people that whatever you sort of take up, you'll be good at. So, in terms of like nowadays, what sort of boxers have you seen that you think that you've looked at and you think they have a good chance of going all the way?
Do you know what? There's so many. There's so many different boxers. I'm always watching all the DAZN shows and things like that. I mean, I'm watching the fight this weekend very closely with Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn, which is the rematch. I think it'll be another barnstormer, but I do fancy Ben to win. I think Ben's hunger's going to be a bit more. I think he's having twins now, isn't he? Chris Eubank Jr. Congratulations to him. But I mean, once you've got 10 million in the bank, must be quite hard to get up and do the road work, when you're walking about in silk pajamas, So, and I think Conor Benn is just that little bit younger, a little bit hungrier. But then again, I could be completely wrong. It could be, the same result.
You say about some of them that, for example, they've got all this money in the bank, but then you look at yourself, you mentioned the fact of working on a building site and then having to score boxes. I can't imagine there's anything harder than that. Having to do both of them sort of things. At least these at the time, they're getting paid that mega money to do it.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? It was hard, but that's when I decided that I should, put my money into doing something that I want to do. Like, for instance, I got qualified to be a personal trainer. So that's what I do. I'm a personal trainer. I'm also qualified to be a professional boxing coach. I've got those badges now. So I'll probably start doing the odd corner and just sort of, edging towards, training my own fighters kind of thing. But, I'd say York is kind of saturated with boxing coaches and boxing gyms. A couple of lads I'm watching closely from York. You've got Brad Casey, you've got Leo Atang, both really nice kids. And I wish them the best, and I hope that they go all the way. I think Leo Atang could bring a lot of exciting times to York. But as far as York goes, mate, I don't think York is a place where you're going to really excel. I think you need to leave York to be able to excel. I think he needs to maybe, be working in those matchroom gyms, working around the best people. I think that's kind of what I failed at maybe when I was younger. I wasn't around world champions. But the only time I was actually sparring a lot of champions was when I was down at Ricky Hatton's gym for a couple of years in Hyde. I was working with Bob Shannon. I still like Glenn Banks sort of managing me and looking after me a little bit. I've always tried to take him wherever I've gone. I did actually leave Glenn for a while, and I went off to Manchester to go solely train there. And to be honest with you, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Glenn knows me inside out. And, I've always trusted Glenn more than anyone else. So I kind of came back to what I know. So sometimes it's going with the person that knows you best that can bring the best out in you.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well with yourself, by the sounds of it, I've seen a lot of posts and things, and you've got a lot of respect. You've definitely been durable. How do you deal with like after fights and stuff like that? Like, how much healthcare is there in terms of boxing? Because you hear boxers complaining about the lack of healthcare.
Do you know what? I think the man upstairs has looked after me because I've had some hard fights and I've come away from it and I've been all right. I've always been quite a quick healer. But I think a lot of it as well. I think after fights, you have to make sure, like, for instance, you get a lot of boxers, they've had a fight and, they'll go on the piss straight away. And I don't really think that's good. I think sometimes you should just chill and make sure that you're fully hydrated before and after a fight. And, I think you should always be focusing on being the right weight. A lot of people try to get themselves too low in weight to the point where it affects your punch resistance and you can get injured. When I was boiling myself down to like super middleweight at one point, I had nothing left. You know what I mean? By the time when I'd weighed in, when I'd rehydrated as well, it just wasn't enough time. So now I kind of box around sort of 12, 13 stone, and that's kind of my weight. And I've always felt healthy at that. Even if the guys are a little bit bigger, I've always felt like I could live with them because I'm a little bit, I'm stronger. So sometimes I think people, they get the weights wrong. But then again, afterwards, you just gotta look after yourself. You just gotta be, always train properly. Always make sure that you're around people after the fight. And I think a lot of it is about recovery as well.
What's the hardest sort of weight cut you've had?
I used to have to do about a stone in like 48 hours wasn't always good, especially when I was boxing 10 rounders for titles and that. Because like the first half of my career, after like sort of 20 odd fights, I was in a 10 rounder every sort of 3 or 4 months, and I was boxing for British Masters, Central Area titles, English titles, things like that. And I was sort of heading towards that level. But I think when I was cutting that much weight and stuff like that, and I was just having to constantly, a lot of my training camp became more about, am I going to make the weight rather than can I get in there and do the job? So I think nowadays, I don't really have to worry so much about weight. It's more about what I'm doing performance-wise. I think a lot of that is experience as well. But yeah, I think it kind of did affect my motivation a bit sort of earlier on.
What's your diet like? Is your diet good all the time then?
I have a balanced diet, really. I mean, I'm always constantly drinking a lot of this water. That helps flush through everything. Breakfast-wise, I always either have, porridge and blueberries, or I'll have like eggs, wholemeal toast. I never eat white bread. I think a lot of it is important about how you start your day. So I do a bit of fasting sometimes. I generally don't really have much sort of milky coffees. I tend to have like espressos, really. And food wise, if I'm having a hard training day, then I'll fuel my body with the correct nutrients. Like obviously a lot of decent macros with your carbs, fats, and proteins. Making sure you've got a good amount of that in one meal. Like for instance, something like jacket potato with tuna is gold. It's really good for having sustained slow releasing energy. And then, afterwards, when you've trained hard, you've got that 1 hour window to maybe have a protein shake. And then if I go home, I might have some potatoes and vegetables and maybe some chicken or some grilled salmon, things like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, mate. If I'm feeling a bit flat, I might have a pizza, because it's just the way it is. Sometimes you've got to have a good balance. And I think having a balanced diet is important. I don't drink that much. Nowadays, if I do have a drink, it might just be, 3 or 4 drinks, and that'll do me, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? I've always got something to do the next day. So,
what's the biggest sort of misconception about journeymen?
That they just turn up to lose and get battered, but it's about how you lose. It's about making it competitive. And I think sometimes as a journeyman, right, you're there to give the guy rounds, make it competitive, put a show on. He sold all the tickets. He wants to obviously keep building a fan base and keep them putting them bums on seats. Now, if I come on a show and I start, battering these guys all the time and they're getting beat, then they're sort of like, people are going to think, okay, well, he's not really going anywhere if he's getting beat by someone who's got a load of losses on his record. But what they don't look at is, the amount of experience I've had and the people that I have fought. But for me, if I keep coming into shows and I keep beating guys, then promoters not necessarily want to use you to build up their fighters. So, for instance, when you're boxing on the road, you're there kind of to, almost kind of just test the prospect. If they're gonna come out and throw the kitchen sink at you, though, then you got to fight. You got to fight fire with fire. But obviously, as a journeyman, you're kind of there using it as work. You want to get booked again. If you start beating all the prospects, they're not going to want to book you. That's the thing. So it's nice to get a little win or a little draw every now and again. But at the same time, it's nice to get in there, box and move, make it a little tough competitive spar, get your money and go. The good thing about being a journeyman is I don't have to sell a ticket. All I've got to do is train, and win, lose or draw, I'm going to get paid. Whereas these guys that are prospects, they may be getting a fight 2 or 3 fights a year. They're busting their asses for 12 weeks. They're having to sell all these tickets. And sometimes some of them might not even earn a wage because they've not sold enough tickets. And they've got to wall down a job, or they've got to get a sponsor. And if they get a loss, it's kind of game over for a minute.
What was it actually like boxing Liam Cameron? Could you see the difference every time you sort of came up against him?
Well, obviously,
how much he got better?
Obviously, I boxed him twice in the beginning of my career. Did 2 6-rounders against him, and they were tough fights still. And he was always a good talent, but he was just tricky kind of thing. And I kind of got through them fights all right. But then this next fight, it's like he just came with a different power, and it's just awkward. And I boxed him at about midnight, and to be honest with you, I didn't realise I was boxing him at midnight. Got in there, had a scrap of him, got caught twice to the body, and it just, I don't know, just kind of, my coach just threw the towel in, was just like, you're not on it tonight. And I just, to be honest with you, it was just one of them nights. Then he's gone on to do what he did. Yeah, I'm guilty of saying that when I stepped in that ring, I was just, I don't know, I felt like a bit of a shadow of myself that night, you know. And then obviously I've gone on to have better nights since, but it's just one of them, mate. You get good days and bad days, especially when you're boxing someone of that caliber.
Do you know that quite early on then? You know, as soon as you sort of get in the ring, how long does it sort of take before you realise that, listen, I'm not at it today?
Oh, do you know what? I was pacing up and down, and the fight just kept getting put back later. It was like, oh yeah, you're on last now. It's like, fuck, I'm only doing 6 rounds. And all the title fights, the 12 rounders and stuff were on before. They wanted to keep our fight last because he'd sold more tickets. So I think by the time, it was after 11 o'clock, my body had just kind of shut down, and I just was mentally tired, to be honest, especially when it comes to the nerves and, and the apprehension and all that kind of stuff. And, I went in there, took it to him for the first round, and, he's caught me on the button, and it is what it is.
How do you keep the hunger to sort of keep going?
I don't know, I just love boxing. I'm always, I think we're boxing. It's like Paulie Malignaggi says.
Struggle with sometimes asking yourself, why do I keep doing this?
You know what? Paulie Malignaggi always says, boxing's like an old girlfriend you can't get rid of. I box as well because it gives me that routine to be able to, have something to train for. When I'm done, I'll be done, and I'll miss it, and I think I'll find it hard, but I don't think it'll be as hard to walk away as it is for most people. I think I've had a lot of good nights. I've enjoyed it as much as I can, and I think I'm just having the last little chunk, and I think that'll do for me.
What's more nerve-wracking, acting or boxing?
Acting is just acting when you're on set. You got multiple takes to do. As long as you turn up and you know your lines, and you're ready to go. And to be honest with you, I think I'm quite competitive with myself with that. With acting, I always want to make sure that the next project is better than the last. And I think the actual acting is not the hard bit. The hard bit is actually getting the work and working with the right people, and people in acting, they dangle a lot of carrots and take it away. There's a lot of people who talk a lot of lies in acting. They promise you stuff and they don't deliver. But then again, I've had other directors that that I've had some good experiences with, like obviously this one that I've just done on Top Film, Bodily Harm. That's going to be really great when it comes out. It's going to be good for my career. The film Boxer on Netflix, that was a good one. And I've done a few other big and sort of independent films which went quite well. So I think sometimes it's just a lot of actors, directors, they have these. A lot of directors, producers, they have these projects in the loop. But I think the hardest thing in this industry is getting funding for your project. Like I've got a project I've been trying to get off the ground. It was called City Limits. It was like the feature version of the film Boxer that I told you about earlier, the short film. Now it's called 8 Count. I've got an award-winning writer on board called Amy Culwick. We've done a brilliant job on what's coming. And then the next big challenge is getting it financed and, getting a few big name actors on board. I know exactly what I want. I know exactly how I want it to go. And it also covers a few themes of the BKB world now, other than the boxing world, which I thought would be good because it's getting quite popular. So that would be another audience that it would bring to the table.
What created the opportunity to start? How did you get into it?
I've got a friend from St Paul's who I used to box for. He was an actor called Ian Spivey, and he asked me one day if I wanted to be an extra in Peaky Blinders season 4, just playing a boxer in the background. And I went on that set. I saw Cillian Murphy and Paul Anderson doing his scene, who plays Arthur Shelby. And I remember just thinking, I don't want to be in the background. And years later, the film I've just done, I actually did a big scene with Paul Anderson in there. So we've got Paul Anderson in our film Bodily Harm, who obviously plays Arthur Shelby in Peaky Blinders. So yeah, it was always something in my head that I just thought, if the boxing doesn't work out, I thought I want to be an actor. And I think with the acting, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong, I've had some days. But I've had some days where I've just thought, what am I doing? You know what I mean? You're always waiting, living on a prayer, thinking it's going to happen, but you have to make it happen. So obviously, on top of that, you have to have a few little, side hustles going on, which obviously is where the personal training comes, and that's where I still box a little bit, because obviously I'm doing all that to be able to carry me through being an actor, which is the toughest job in the world, but at the same time, it's the best job in the world, because when you're acting and you're working, it's great, but then when you're not and you're chasing it, it can be a bit frustrating.
What's been the hardest sort of adjustment to doing acting, going from boxing, that obviously that's what you've always done, to then going to something completely different?
Well, as boxers, we're all actors, aren't we? Because when we get hit, we're acting like we're not hurt, but we are. So we're always having to put a little poker face on there. And as well, we're boxing. You're going in there and you're potentially risking your life in front of, or risking being embarrassed in front of thousands of people. So at the same, the thing, obviously we've been an actor. You're performing again in front of lots of people. But if you get it wrong, the director will just say, "Okay, cut. Let's just go again." And you've got another shot at it. With boxing, you ain't got another shot at it. If you get caught, you're hitting the canvas, and everyone's going to be talking about it. So I think I've had to develop quite a lot of resilience, from my losses and stuff like that. Because, I have people talking about it and, Harry Matthews, he's not as good as he thinks he is, all that kind of stuff. I've got haters out there. But at the same time, I've got a lot of people that support me and they get it and they understand that it's not been easy doing what I've done. I've been through a lot of, low stages in my life.
Been in ring, mate.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's, they're all...
They haven't been there. They haven't done it.
They're all good sat in an armchair or, sat in the crowd, aren't they, saying what they would have done. But
what sort of role do you describe yourself as an actor?
I'm someone that can play either a reformed criminal, someone like that, or, someone who's someone's crazy ex, or maybe like someone who can play like a good bad guy. I can also play someone who's, quite funny and charismatic. And I also I like challenging myself maybe at a role that I maybe wouldn't be used to. Do you know what I mean? I think with acting, you shouldn't always go for what you feel more comfortable doing. Sometimes you should go out your comfort zone as well. So I think I'm always open to other challenges. I've got a scene that I'm doing soon actually with a woman who offered me to do like a bit of a period drama piece. So I'm playing someone who's kind of like a gardener, which is having an affair with a woman set back in the period times. So yeah, which is going to be quite a good scene for me to do, and something that I haven't done before. So it'll be good.
Oh, that's class, mate. What's your aims for next year then? Where do you want to be by end of next year?
Next year, I want Bodily Harm to have had a good reception, and I want to be happy with it once I've seen the edit, because I've not seen the edit yet, so I'm going to be sort of apprehensive about that. And then obviously my feature film, 8 Count, I want to get it financed. I want to begin filming by the end of next year and just be pushing on with that really. And obviously every project is another stepping stone to the next. And, it would be nice to maybe booked a job or two elsewhere, through my agent. I've got an agent in Manchester who's quite big called Red Door Management. It'd be nice to book a job with them, because I'm always getting put up against for roles that I'm up against people who are kind of top end. So I've got stiff competition. So it'd be nice to book a role. Obviously one of the big jobs.
Yeah, I think for yourself as well. I think you've got a massive amount of motivation for all the boxing and the hard times that you've had through that. I think if you can do that and continue for how long you have getting in there with some of these names, then I think acting is something that eventually will come to you, mate. You'll get these parts, and I'm sure you will, because you've got the drive for it.
Yeah, do you know what? I think a lot of it is just about sticking around. It's like, did Denzel Washington who said, you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're going to get your hair cut, aren't you? It's one of them. You hang around in anything long enough, you're going to get your shot. I think with boxing, I did my best. I had aspirations to be a British and world champion. I just wasn't in the right company of like sparring the world champions and stuff all the time. And I think as well, when I was at that level, I wasn't right up there. I was, my head was in other places, maybe wrong relationships and pretty, just distractions and stuff. So I think I've learned a lot along the way about myself.
How much of boxing is actually mental and how much of it is physical?
I was training someone this morning who was wanting my help for a fight actually. And I was explaining to them that I would say boxing is probably maybe 20 or 30% physical and 70% mental. Because if you've not got it in there, and you're not able to adapt to someone's style, and you're not able to come up with another plan and stay calm under pressure and think about your distance and your timing and all that kind of stuff, then you're not really gonna do it. And I think a lot of it is staying quite calm under pressure. And I think doing that under the lights you know, as opposed to doing it in the gym is very different. So, you know, a lot of it is mental.
What sort of boxes do you watch now then that you really enjoy watching?
I enjoy watching all boxers really. I mean, every fight on DAZN. You know, I like watching, you know, up and coming prospects and seeing how far they can go. I like a lot of the Eddie Hearn fighters from Matchroom. You know, he's always got new guys coming through. I quite like this new heavyweight. What's his name? Ituma. I think he's going to do a lot of big things. Moses Atoma. And I think that fight the other week, who was it again? Joseph Parker fought, who was the other guy that he fought? Wardley, Fabio Wardley. I think Wardley, you know what? I think Wardley's going to be a world champ. I think he's going to be great. And he's come from the white collar scene, hasn't he? And also I enjoyed watching the fighter on GBM this weekend, which was, you know, they had quite a few surprising results really. Like the guy who won it, you wouldn't have thought he was going to win it in the beginning, and he just had that awkward style which kind of got better and better, you know, for each fight he was in. So yeah, that's what I love about boxing. You know, one punch can turn everything around. We're all capable of a puncher's chance, you know.
Absolutely. So before we go, what's some of the things that you've got coming out now, acting wise? What's some of the films, so we can obviously keep note, and I'll make sure I get them watched?
Well, obviously I've got Boxer, which was obviously I've got the short film called Boxer, which is on YouTube. But Boxer, the Netflix film, which I was in, I played a supporting role called Roy Barber, who fights the world champion. I'm sort of in and out of it. I've got some decent dialogue and some good fight scenes in it. That's on Netflix at the minute. I do appear very briefly in a 6-part drama called The Gathering. I just end up doing a bit of an intimate scene with the lead actress, which is quite cool. And I've got obviously Bodily Harm coming out next year. That's going to be on Amazon Prime. I reckon it's probably going to be out sort of March, April time. That just depends on the edit. And yeah, as far as the rest of my career goes, just kind of watch this space really.
Well, I look forward to it all, mate. Thank you very much for coming on, Harry. I think you should be really proud of yourself, and I think you should be. I think keep chasing them goals, which I think is really important, mate. And, you know, don't listen to all noise sometimes that people say, because at the end of the day, they can do what you could do. You're doing that long in boxing and coming up against these names and things like that, and putting yourself really in the way of them all, really, to test them out. So it's a hard thing to do, mate. It really, really is. It takes a special person to be able to do something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other journeymen out there who are quite inspiring as well. There's Robbie Chapman, he's from down south, and there's a guy called Jordan Granham. Jordan Granham is actually, I actually got him in my film, Bodily Harm, to do a decent scene. He's in with the boxing gym actually, so we have a bit of dialogue together. But he's another one to watch out for. Jordan Granham, he's had nearly 200 pro fights, and he's another guy that can win if he wants to. Oh. So yeah, he's, you know, I meet a lot of good guys on the away scene. So yeah.
Well, boxing won't be boxing if they didn't have the likes of yourself testing people out. They wouldn't have no one to fight, would they?
Exactly. Glenn Banks is going to be gutted when I leave. So yeah.
He will be. Cheers, Harry.
All right, nice one. Cheers, pal. Thanks for having me.